Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to jump back in time about 100 years ago to look at Spain. It was a time when the whole country went through some massive changes. We're talking from a kingdom to being run by a dictator, and then to a brand new democracy, all in just a handful of years. So, how did that all happen? Let's find out.
So let's start with this big question. What happens when the people leading a country have really big problems? Problems so big they can't control things anymore. That question is right at the heart of the story we're about to get into.
All right, we're going to break this story down into four parts. First, we'll see how the kingdom was in some serious trouble. Then, we'll look at how a powerful dictator came in and took over. After that, we'll see how a new democracy was born. And finally, we'll talk about why all of this still matters.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story begins in Spain in the early 1900s. Back then, Spain was a kingdom, and it was ruled by, well, a king. This period was called the Restoration, and it had actually started way back in 1874. But we're going to focus on the time starting in 1902, when a new king came to power, and see what happened right up until 1923, when the whole system fell apart. The man in charge was King Alfonso XIII. Now, he was the king, but things weren't as stable as they seemed. The ground was already starting to shake under his throne. So you might think, okay, there's a king, everything's fine, right? Well, not exactly. In fact, Spain was dealing with some really serious problems. There were three huge issues tearing the country apart. First, all the political groups were just fighting with each other for power. Second, workers all over the country were angry and wanted better jobs and better lives. And third, Spain was stuck in a long, expensive war in Morocco that nobody liked. So when you put all of that together, the fighting politicians, the angry workers, and the unpopular war, you get a whole lot of conflict. The kingdom was feeling really weak, and it seemed like something was about to break. Now, when a country is in that much trouble, it creates an opening for someone to step in, promising to fix everything. And that's exactly what happened. A huge change was on its way. And here he is, a general named Primo de Rivera. In 1923, he saw how weak the government was, and he used the army to take over. This is called a military coup. And you know who supported him? The king himself. Just like that, Primo de Rivera was in control. So, Primo de Rivera became a dictator. What's a dictator? It's pretty simple. It's one person who has all the power in a country. And the most important part is the people don't get to vote for them. They take power, usually with force. And the changes were huge and happened almost overnight. Before, with the king, Spain had a constitution, a set of rules for the government, and it had political parties. Under the dictator, poof, the constitution was gone, and all political parties were banned. People's freedoms disappeared too. You couldn't just write or say what you wanted anymore, especially if you disagreed with the government. That's called censorship, and it meant people weren't free to speak their minds. Now, here's the surprising part. At first, a lot of people actually supported the dictator. They were so tired of all the problems that they hoped he could bring some order. But over time, people saw that he wasn't solving the real issues, and even the king and the army turned against him. Once he lost the support of the army and the king, his time was up. In 1930, after 7 years, Primo de Rivera quit and left the country. The dictatorship was over, but it left a big question. What now? And that brings us to the next chapter. The dictator is gone. So what happens now? Does Spain go back to the way things were with the king, or would they try something totally different? They chose something totally new. In 1931, there were some local elections, and the results showed that almost nobody wanted the king anymore. So King Alfonso left the country, and Spain became a republic. And what does a republic mean? Simple, no more king. Specifically, Spain became a democracy. And a democracy is a type of government where the people have the power because they get to vote for their leaders. After a king and a dictator, this was a massive change. And one of the biggest changes was this. For the very first time in Spanish history, everyone could vote. Not just men, but women too. This was a huge step forward for equality. The new government also started making other big changes, which are called reforms. For example, the church used to have a lot of control over schools, and the government changed that. They also gave some parts of Spain, like Catalonia, more power to rule themselves. But, and this is super important,
Not everyone was happy about these fast changes. While some people loved them, others, like church leaders and rich landowners, hated them. So instead of bringing everyone together, the new democracy actually created new fights and new problems.
So let's zoom out and put it all together. We've seen so much happen in such a short time. Why does any of this matter? What can we learn from it?
You can really see Spain's story in 3 big steps. Step 1, the kingdom was weak and had tons of problems. Step 2, that weakness allowed a dictator to come in and take control. And step 3, when the dictator failed, the people finally got to choose and they chose a democracy.
The big idea here is that making big changes is complicated. Pushing for new freedoms is great, but as we saw, it can also lead to new fights and new problems. It leaves us with a really tough question that countries still think about today. What's the most important thing for people in a country to have? Stability? Freedom? It's not so easy to answer. Thanks for exploring this story with us today.